The OCD and Anxiety Podcast by Robert James Coaching. Hello and welcome to episode 340, where today we're going to be taking back control from OCD and anxiety, as we always do on this podcast. Now, if you would like to get a free session with me to help you with OCD or anxiety, then you can get that by heading over to my website, which is robertjamescoaching.com. There you can book that free session directly, or if you prefer, you can send me a message and let me know about what you're struggling with. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking specifically about mistakes and an OCD. This is something that many people struggle with because, of course, there's an element of perfectionism that is often tied up with OCD. And, being able to actually allow mistakes into your life when it comes to obsessions is incredibly important in order for you to be able to move past them. And so we're going to be talking in detail about that today. If you have any questions at all for me about anything that we do talk about, do please feel free to let me know. We now have Patreon for the podcast. So if you're interested in signing up for Patreon, you can find a link for that in the show notes. And also, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can do so by searching for @RobertJamesCoaching UK. So many thanks, guys, and off we go. So I wanted to start today with a quote by George Bernard Shaw, and it is this: "A life spent making mistakes is not only more honourable, but more useful than a life spent doing nothing." And very sadly, I think this is unfortunately part of the process of OCD. As we get more and more caught up in our thoughts, more and more caught up in our obsessions, and wanting to make sure that things are just right, unfortunately, what tends to happen is that we stop actually living our lives in an interesting and fun and meaningful way, because we become completely obsessed about our fears and avoiding those things at any cost. And mistakes is just another kind of part of that. Actually, obsessions can really just center around this kind of form of perfectionism, where we're really demanding that we get everything just right. And of course, when that happens, well, life starts to close off from us. We don't have as many opportunities anymore because, if we're always demanding that things be just right, it's very hard to kind of go out and just do things and, try new things, take on challenges, take on, healthy risks, because we're demanding that everything be perfect, that we don't ever make a mistake. And, this is a really unfortunate way to kind of live your life. And really what tends to happen when we get really caught up in that kind of thinking, is that it gets worse. The more that we think about this and we think in this way, the more that we feel that we need to have perfection. And it can turn up in different ways with an OCD. Obviously, a very clear example would be hand washing, where, we feel that we need to get it just right before we're able to kind of move on. Or that just right feeling is actually something that seems to affect people across the spectrum of OCD. It's something that we really feel that we need to feel just right before we're able to move on. So we have to think about that thing enough. We have to perform that compulsion in that particular way. And if we don't, then of course something terrible could happen, or the anxiety is going to get worse, or our catastrophizing brain will come up with all sorts of reasons for why we have to kind of do that thing perfectly. And unfortunately, it is just keeping us stuck. In my experience, a life well lived is actually one where you're willing to kind of open up to the fact that you're going to make mistakes sometimes, and that's okay, that actually that's a positive thing because you can learn from those mistakes. Really, it's kind of a very deeply uncompassionate, self-compassionate thing to do, to demand perfection from yourself, to demand that you always get things right, or that you always have that just right feeling. Whether it's you wanting to leave your house first thing in the morning without having to go back to check the oven or to check that you locked the door properly, or whether it's to do with hand washing, or whether it's to do with purely obsessional OCD and checking your thoughts again and again. Really, it's the same thing going on here. It's that we're feeling very anxious about making that mistake or doing something wrong. We don't want to feel it, and so we're trying to push it away and trying to say no to it. We're trying to get rid of it. And in the process, we're kind of keeping ourselves stuck in this OCD cycle, because as we know, when we start saying no to difficult thoughts, difficult emotions, and we demand not to have them, all we do is we create that cycle of OCD and we get ourselves stuck in it more and more. So really learning how to kind of lean into the fact that you're going to make some mistakes in your life, and that actually that's okay, because in order for you to grow and learn, you need to make those mistakes, is really the kind of way forward. And I think a really helpful person who kind of really researches this area is a psychologist called Carol Dwek, and you may have heard about her. I think I've talked about her before on the podcast. She has this theory called the growth mindset theory, and what this really focuses on is the fact that when you do make a mistake, it really isn't a bad thing. It gives you an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to move on in your life. And if you're always kind of determined that you're going to do things perfectly the first time, then you're never going to really be able to fulfill yourself as much as you could. You're never going to really become the best version of yourself, because you're not giving yourself the opportunity to truly learn from your mistakes. And so I've got a couple of quotes here from Carol Dwek that I think are really helpful in this regard. The first one is this. When there's a setback, someone with a fixed mindset will start thinking, maybe I don't have what it takes. They may get defensive and give up. A hallmark of a successful person is that they persist in the face of obstacles, and often these obstacles are blessings in disguise. And really, this is the kind of way that I like to try to live my life when I'm dealing with OCD. I try to see OCD, as hard as this is, and I know it's really difficult because OCD is awful. It's a really hard and difficult thing to deal with. But if we are able to bring what she's talking about here to the table when it comes to OCD, where we acknowledge, okay, this is really difficult, I really don't like it, I'm feeling awful. However, what can I learn from this? How can I lean into this just a little bit today, so that I can begin to learn something about it? How can I let go of that perfectionism today? How can I actually allow myself to kind of do something imperfectly or to make a bit of a mistake in order to actually grow from that and to develop myself? It's so much about doing that with OCD. If we're able to do that, that means that we're going to be willing to lean into discomfort. We're going to be willing to take on exposure challenges. We're going to be willing to kind of say maybe to the thoughts. And all of these things are the way in which we're going to learn how to manage OCD successfully in the long term. Here's another really good quote from Carol Dwek. You try something, it doesn't work. And maybe people even criticize you. In a fixed mindset, you say, I tried this, it's over. In a growth mindset, you look for what you've learned. And again, society, our culture sometimes is quite unhealthy. It almost demands that we don't make mistakes, that we be perfect. But of course, that's a really unhealthy way to be in the world, as we've just kind of talked about. And so, as she says here, when you do make those mistakes, if you feel like criticizing yourself, or if other people are criticizing you, well, I'm sorry, you need to kind of stand up to that, if you like. You need to be able to say to those people, well, I'm just a person, I'm doing the best I can, I am going to make mistakes sometimes, and that's okay. And when you can bring that level of compassion to your mistakes, both to other people and of course to yourself as well, then you're going to actually start changing these difficult experiences from something that are really horrible, something that you feel that you can't deal with, you can't make that mistake, or you can't push out of this thing because you're not feeling just right. Instead, you start opening up to that special word with OCD, and that is uncertainty. You start allowing yourself to feel that uncertainty. You start saying, okay, maybe I am going to make a mistake if I do this, but that's okay. Maybe I won't make a mistake if I just give myself the opportunity. But maybe I will, and if I do, that doesn't matter because I'm going to learn from it. And when you start developing that way of dealing with OCD, well, actually, the world is your oyster. Suddenly, things really open up and you see all sorts of possibilities and you realize that you're the boss. The OCD is not the boss. And things do start to improve. But, it really does involve us taking that first step and recognizing that we have choice. We're not a victim here with the OCD. We do always have a choice as to whether we're going to do what we've always been doing and what has kept us stuck, or if we're going to start doing things in a different way. And this choice is kind of the first step. We've got to recognize that choice. And, we've got to start hopefully making slightly different decisions, because in my view, in order to start dealing with this type of mistake-focused OCD, we have to be able to kind of do exposure here where we lean into the discomfort of, perhaps making a mistake. And, so it could be that you need to identify, some areas where you're very, very fearful of making mistakes. Now, of course, how you do this, you need to be careful. If it's something related to work, then, you're not going to want to make a mistake there. So, I wouldn't focus on that. I would focus on other areas of your life, where it doesn't matter so much if you do make a mistake, but you're demanding in that area of your life that you be perfect. And see if you can maybe start to push back a little bit there with that. See if you can actually just do something and without kind of determining beforehand if you're going to do that thing perfectly, just try to do it anyway and see what happens. Maybe you'll do it well. Maybe you'll do it pretty well. Maybe you'll do it terribly. It doesn't really matter. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. That the idea here, of course, is just get on, start living your life more, because OCD doesn't want you to. It really wants you to be stuck. It wants you to be miserable. It doesn't want you, to be out there living life, taking healthy challenges on. It wants you to actually stay stuck. And so we need to be able to make that decision, that choice, and actually say to the OCD, no, not today. You know what? I am actually going to go and do this thing, or I don't need to wait until I feel just right to go and do that thing. And when we start doing this, well, as I was talking about at the start, this is when we start to take back control from OCD. You are not a victim against OCD. OCD does not have your best interests at heart whatsoever. There is this part of us, the inner critic, that kind of wants to protect us by keeping us safe, by making sure that we don't make any mistakes. But if we always listen to that part of us, then we're just gonna, stay safe all the time. We're never gonna step out into our life and actually live it in the way in which, will bring a lot of meaning and purpose and, all the fantastic things that we can have in this life. And so, learning how to just listen to that inner critic, but not take it so seriously, and step out there and start doing some of the things in your life that perhaps you've been avoiding because of your fears about perfectionism or making a mistake. If you can start doing this, then, I think it's a really positive step in the right direction. So many thanks, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed that. If you have any questions at all about anything that I've spoken about today, do please let me know, and I will see you next time. Please remember that any information you listen to on the podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for actual medical or mental health advice from a doctor, psychologist, or any other medical or mental health professional.